nur nichts tue, wenn ich...
In an interview with Francisco Patasio about shell shock cinema, Anton Case says, "In my opinion, M would absolutely qualify as a shell shock film."
In jeder Konditorei, in jedem kleinsten Kolonialwarengeschäft nach dem Ursprung dieser Tüte geforscht. Umsonst.
While its visual style and historical context fit within the German movement of New Objectivity, Fritz Lang's M takes an expressionist approach to sound and acting. Fritz Lang, whose career had its beginnings in the German expressionist style, merges extreme vocal utterances, city sounds, and silence with a new objectivist visual approach. This marriage results in a film that has been deeply influential within a variety of genres, but manages to resist association with one historical movement. In his essay on defining New Objectivity, Fritz Schmallenbach asserts that this movement was not only characterized by a rejection of impressionist and expressionist tendencies, but also that it tried to capture an underlying revolution in the general mental attitude of the times. Schmallenbach makes clear that despite its break from the abstractions of experimental forms, the movement remained steeped in modern influences and was not synonymous with strict realism. Though Lang's visual style in M mostly adheres to New Objectivism, this clip illustrates some very different methods at work in his approach to sound. Throughout one of the film's most famous scenes, a minister and the police commissioner discuss the investigation of the child murderer. As the conversation drones on, Lang uses one of the earliest examples of cross-cutting dialogue to invoke images and scenes from around the city in which the investigation has turned up no results. Lang employs the abundance of droning dialogue here as a counterpoint to the completely silent section, then the police raid, that will immediately follow this scene. Lang uses speech patterns and noise to distinguish class and social roles, while hysteria is exhibited among the common classes as a result of the string of child murders. These two officials maintain a mostly formal and at times even tedious conversation. The one brief moment in which the minister raises his voice can be viewed as an example of Lang blending expressive sound and acting styles with a visual style rooted in the New Objectivism of artists like George Grosz and George Schultz.
Die Polizei hat auf der Suche nach dem unbekannten Mörder bisher mehr als 1500 detaillierte Spuren verfolgt. Das gesammelte Aktenmaterial.
Like these artists, Lang portrayed Weimar society in a more realistic, sobering style than we see in the German expressionist films that were released prior to M. However, it is clear from these scenes that he intended to use the full range of his actors as surrogates for German citizens and officials to reach levels of expressiveness not otherwise possible in the plastic arts of this era. As Catherine Roper states in her essay on sounds of the city in M, far more frequently than the injections of carefully chosen sound into silences, the sounds of Lang's city are made by humans whose utterances serve widely varying dramaturgical function. In contrast to the two officials, the general populace, characterized by Roper as often in a mode of panic, whistles, shouts at each other, screams, and sometimes reaches a state of complete silence depending on the needs of the situation. This is epitomized here in a segment in which two witnesses in the Beckman murder case argue over the color of the girl's cap. Lang shoots each man from the perspective of the spectator, while the other breaks the fourth wall to shout directly at the audience.
Schluss hat ja keinen Zweck. Ich danke, meine Herren. Bitte.
Throughout this direct address to the audience, which almost borders on attraction-based cinema in its blatant attempt to stir emotion, Long has taken a page from his German expressionist roots. In an interview with Francisco Patasio about shell-shock cinema, Anton Case says, in fact, one can surmise that in 1931, Beckert, Peter Lorre's character, was recognized as a shell-shocked war veteran who had spent some time in a mental hospital. In Case's own essay, Tales from the Asylum, he frames the murderous acts in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as necessarily imagined traumatic events, helping the shell-shocked protagonist cope with the horrors of the war. From his comments, it seems Case might say the same would apply to Beckert's murders in M. Within this reading, the visual and oral elements of Lorre's acting, especially during his climactic confession, can also be viewed as an expressionist performance encased in a largely new objectivist film. Along with the two witnesses and several other instances throughout the film, in which voices range from complete silence to guttural outbursts, M's performances can be viewed primarily within the expressionist mold. After the witness argument, Long offers the viewer about a full minute of silent cinema. Police cars empty out in silence, pedestrians walk on dark streets, and a head detective instigates the police raid simply by nodding his head. Caius Gunning and other scholars have noted that M blurs the line between silent cinema and sound films. In his book on the film, Caius goes so far to say it has rightly been called a silent film with sound. The abundance of silent or near-silent sections serve as a counterpoint to the performances. The whistles, street sounds, and guttural pleas to emotion in this film are that much more impactful because they often follow moments of total silence, making possible an even greater degree of expressiveness from the performances. This segment ends with both metal and human whistles that can barely be distinguished from each other, signifying the coming police raid. We are fully out of the silent era again when a woman alerts the band of criminals about the raid. Typifying Case's point, the viewer is woken from their silent trance by a compendium of sounds, including the same woman screaming at the invading officers. While M exhibits an obvious relationship to the new objectivist movement in its visual style, its use of audio reveals clear influences rooted in the silent era, and specifically German Expressionism. Arriving in 1931 at the cusp of the sound era, M's amalgam of stylistic approaches makes it a truly unique film in the history of cinema, and one that defies strict placement in one genre or historical movement.
Aber Kind, das sollst du doch nicht. Du weißt doch warum.